Childhood is a time of our lives when everything was fun and games. The worries weren't something too serious at that time. One of the things we loved the most was cartoons and children's shows. But at that time, we didn't pay too much attention to the details. Now that our mind is more suspicious and aware of many things, we can discover some of the dark secrets hidden in these kid shows. Get ready to be amazed with this top 5 darkest details you never noticed in popular kids shows. Before we begin, make sure you hit that subscribe button to get notified every day for more amazing content. With that being said, let's begin. Number 5. The True Story of Hey Arnold. Many have seen this cartoon, but maybe no one knows one of the most important and creepy details behind one of the plots of the show. If you've never seen it, let us tell you it's a pretty common story where there are adventures, dilemmas, and love. Yep, love. One of the most outstanding stories that is developed throughout the show is the love Helga feels for the main character. She's a little obsessed with Arnold. We can say it's tough love because sometimes she treats him quite badly. But in reality, she's really crazy about him. But the curious thing here is that behind this story that seems innocent is that there is a very disturbing story. It's said that in Moscow once lived a 14-year-old teenager who had mental problems and spent much of her life in a boarding school for having bipolar disorder. In the place where she was treated, she was attended by a psychologist, and it said that it was him who sold the case to the producers of the cartoon. The craziest thing is that this was confirmed by the creators of the show. But let's continue with the story. After a while, they saw some improvements in the girl. Her parents decided to let her attend school without really thinking what could happen. Immediately, all the children and teachers labeled the girl as weird and lonesome. It's then when a not too handsome boy, but with a special charisma, approached her to establish a friendship. Yes, very similar to Arnold, but without the head and the shape of a football. Shortly after realizing the strange reactions the girl had, he noticed she wasn't mentally fit. That's when the problems began. She started harassing him, and many witnesses said she looked like she was a shadow. The boy's family warned him to stay away from the girl, and she went into a serious depression, attempting suicide several times. After all this madness, she herself accepted to be interned again. A week went by, and she managed to escape and go find her impossible love. The frightened and scared boy had her interned in a psychiatric hospital for people with more serious problems. On the 7th day of hospitalization, she saw she couldn't escape. She then cut her hand to be taken to a hospital. She then managed to escape from the hospital, but she died from the bleeding. However, she had written the name of the boy she loved on her arm with some kind of needle. Spooky. Number 4. Hidden mental problems in the Fairly Odd Parents. Who wouldn't want to have fairly odd parents who, with only raising their wand, could grant you all their wishes? Sure, any of us would be happy to have one of these in our lives because, to be honest, things would be much simpler. But of course, this is fiction, and although this show may have been among your favorites, there are a few details you probably missed, because of course, you were only a child when you saw it. Timmy Turner is a suffering child. He had terrible grades at school, his parents practically didn't pay any attention to him, and he had a babysitter that was so bad to him she made him feel like he was in hell. But when everything seemed to be going terrible, the Fairly Odd Parents appeared in Timmy's life to make him happy by fulfilling every wish he has. But let's stop for a moment and analyze this character a little better. Timmy is in reality a schizophrenic child. And why would we say this? Well, very simply, he sees beings no one else can see, talks to himself and to inanimate objects. Clearly, he had to create imaginary beings to help him escape his depressing and troubled life. But he's not the only character in the series with certain kinds of mental problems. Do you remember the younger sister of Timmy's babysitter? Her name is Tootie, and she's clearly obsessed with little Turner. She has a neurotic love disorder. She's crazy about Timmy and chases him to the point of him wanting to hide under a rock so she never finds him. Then there's Trixie, the most popular and beautiful girl in the school. But this character also suffers from a mental disorder. This girl has a huge superiority complex and feels more important than anyone around her. And she treats with scorn whoever she feels is not at her level. On the other hand, her best friend Veronica has an inferiority complex. She feels like a cockroach when she's close to Trixie, and at the same time she won't take a single step without Trixie approving it first. Maybe all this sounds crazy to you, but each of the characters in this show has the same exact attitudes as people in life who suffer each of the disorders we've discussed. If you don't believe us or are not convinced, we invite you to see a few chapters after having seen this video and then tell us what you think. Number 3. SpongeBob and the 7 Deadly Sins. Let's see. This is one of the strangest animated TV shows ever to exist, but it's been running for many years and has several fans, including children and some not so young people. But they all still enjoy the adventures of SpongeBob SquarePants. But let's create a bit of controversy around here. SpongeBob's characters represent each of the 7 deadly sins. If you think this is crazy, well, wait a bit, because once we explain it to you, you'll think twice before saying it's nonsense. The greed or uncontrolled desire to treasure wealth is represented by Mr. Krabs, who abuses his clients and does everything to get more money. The gluttony, the inordinate appetite for eating and drinking, is represented by Gary the Snail, who does nothing else but this. When it's not being fed, it even starts eating the chairs. Squidward is a character made in the image and likeness of wrath. This is undeniable because he shows it with his hatred of working in Krusty Krab, in his sarcastic sense of humor, and his constant complaints no one appreciates. Poor Squidward. Even the tender Sandy represents pride. She always wants to emphasize she's the only land creature that lives in an underwater dome and is always desperate to show off her athletic skills. Envy is reflected in Plankton, who is consumed by the desire to achieve the same success as Mr. Krabs. It depresses him that his restaurant doesn't prosper and dreams of stealing the formula to get his enemy out of business. The last two are laziness and lust. The first vice seems to be brought to life by Patrick, who doesn't make an effort even for speaking. There's even an episode where he won an award for doing absolutely nothing. The craziest theory is the one relating SpongeBob with lust. Although when we think of lust, sex comes to our mind, the alternative definition of lust is nothing more than a passionate desire for something. This is obviously perfect for the sponge, who has a passion for life that can't be measured and who wants to have the affection of friends and enemies. He's eager to please, even many times will stop at nothing to complete a task. Yes, we know it sounds crazy, but if you think about it, it does all make sense. Number 2. Kids on Jimmy Neutron are genetically altered. We all remember the great Jimmy Neutron, the genius boy who made great inventions and who practically loved his brain more than he did his own parents. But don't let the memories distract you, because in this countdown, we're focusing on the mysterious things in these children's TV shows, and this is no exception. When a series is successful, the cleverest fans create the craziest theories you can imagine. But the craziest thing about all this is that they really make us think and see things in different ways. That's why we're sure that after telling you about this incredible theory, you'll realize that in the small details is where the most interesting things are found. The theory was formulated by Organic Chemistry, a user of the social network called Reddit. It became quite popular, and we're sure it will leave you thinking for a while. It turns out he relates the plot of Retroville with the government of the United States. He says Jimmy, Carl, Sheen, Cindy, and Libby are genetically modified children and receive a certain superpower, and afterwards they're implanted in a fake family to nurture them. The rest of the city is composed of actors employed by the government. Yep, we're sure this completely blew up your head. Now listen to this. He also mentions that Retroville is a test field where all of Jimmy's inventions are stolen by the government, since most of them only appear in one episode and are never seen again. Retroville and all the adventures of the children are secret development scenarios for Jimmy's inventions. The truth is that it sounds pretty crazy, but if you analyze it a bit, it's not that far stretched. As we told you before, we don't think we're crazy. The best you can do is to take a look at any chapter of the series after hearing this, and you can tell us if this theory is absurd or if it actually makes sense. Remember that although they're cartoons for children, writers are adults and are capable of many things. Number 1. Animal abuse in the Flintstones. This is a classic among cartoons, and we don't believe anyone has stopped watching it. We all know very well the rustic and not so subtle of all characters, Fred Flintstone, his wife Wilma, his friend Barney, and Barney's beautiful and tender wife Betty. But we're not going to tell you a story everyone knows. Now, what catches our attention is a very curious element that was so common in the cartoon, and you probably missed it. And maybe when we tell you, you'll be surprised. Did you ever realize the Flintstones' world economy is based entirely on animal abuse? Sure, maybe you hadn't thought about it, but it's really true. It's obvious this cartoon is set in the prehistoric era, and there was a coexistence between the animals that lived at the time and humans, but it's not as cute as it sounds. Don't think about Dino, the Flintstones' pet, because he doesn't suffer at all. The terrible thing here is the animals that have the role of electrical appliances. The garbage disposal, the bread slicer, the water hose for the garden, all of those things are animals, and if you look at their faces, they aren't enjoying their work at all. Sure, you hadn't realized this, right? Well, this show did receive some criticism regarding the matter, but in spite of that, it's a grim detail many didn't notice. But that's why we're here, so that you open your mind and don't overlook the important things. Even though many of these secrets and theories are quite crazy, you can't deny they got you thinking, right? Hope you enjoyed the video, Top Fivers. If you haven't already, check out our other channel, Americano, to enjoy even more amazing list videos. There'll be a link in the description, so check it out.